Welcome to my new calculus channel. I am John Gabriel. In this particular video, what I'd like to discuss is the topic of academic hypocrisy, especially by considering a very well-known fallacy, the fallacy that 0.999 with an ellipsis behind it is equal to 1. Okay, this here is a fallacy, and I'll explain some of the hypocrisy behind it and why academics can't relinquish this fallacy. It's not possible to relinquish the fallacy because in essence they would be admitting their ignorance the past few hundred years, their incompetence, and their unbelievable stupidity. So indeed they'd have to reject most of mainstream calculus by rejecting this fallacy. And let me explain why. If you look at this definition of 0.999, which thanks to Euler's blunder, this definition here states that 0.999 with an ellipsis following it is equal to the sum of this particular sequence here, which is an infinite sequence. Of course, an infinite sum is not possible, so what Euler did was he defined Euler, this is Euler here, let's write his name here, he's the culprit. He defined S to be equal to the limit of S, where S is the sequence. So in this particular case, this is the sequence, okay? Now, for those of you who are not mathematicians or very good at math, a sequence is actually the partial sums of a series. So the actual series we're dealing with here is really this. Okay, so this here is the series. This is the series, and this here is the sequence. So this whole thing here is a sequence. Okay, so a sequence consists of the partial sums of the series. So the first one is 0.9, the second one is 0.9 plus 0.09, etc. Okay, so Euler defined the infinite sum to be equal to the limit of the sequence. As you can see, the limit of this sequence here is 1. Okay, the sequence cannot attain the value of 1 ever, and this particular expression here is proof that this sequence cannot attain the value of 1. Well, why is that? Well, if you look at this expression here, 1 minus 1 over 10 to the n, essentially what you'd need is for this particular term here to become 0. Okay, I've just let h equal to 1 over 10 to the n here and inverted the sense of the limit from n going to n becoming increasingly large to n to h approaching 0. So by letting h equal to this, effectively I've said that that's the same as h approaching 0 as n approaches infinity. So all I've done here is I've said the limit as h actually it's as n, the limit as n approaches infinity of 1 over 10 to the n is 0, and I just let that equal to h as I've done here. So this is the justification. It's not really a justification, but it's their justification, the Eulerian blunder, It's what I call the Eulerian blunder. Eulerian blunder. Okay. Is a justification for them saying that 0.999 dot 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 is equal to 1. If they had to agree that this is wrong and that you can't have this term being 0 ever. In fact, think about it. There is no integer n or any other value of n that will make 1 over 10 to the n 0. There is no solution to this. Okay. What mathematicians do is they simply say, oh yes, there is, as n approaches infinity, which it can't, nothing can really approach infinity. That in itself is an oxymoron. So, but as n becomes very, very large, increasing without bounds, they say that the value of this expression will be 0. It will never be 0. It will be very, very small, but it will never be 0. Okay. So now what have they done in calculus? Well, in calculus, the flawed Newtonian and Cauchy derivative definition is this. So, in order for this to be true, in order for lim h approaches 0 of 2x plus h to be true, h must be 0. Can't be infinitesimal because infinitesimals do not exist. Okay, there is no such thing as an infinitesimal. And if you know a lot about set theory and you've done some topology, you can go to Wikipedia to the infinitesimal page and you can read up in the talk section my debate with Arthur Rubin. He's a mathematician who runs the Wikipedia edits, and you can see how I debated Rubin and proved that there is no such thing as an infinitesimal despite his desperate attempts to define one. It's quite a long debate, so I'm not going to go into that particular debate right now, but you can look at it for yourself and see also the hypocrisy there, where Rubin just can't seem to admit that it makes no sense to have a subset of the interval 0, 1 containing the infinitesimals with no least upper bound. Okay, so essentially Rubin was saying that using filters and ultrafilters, there is a little subset here, let's just denote it like that, which contains all the infinitesimals. Of course, it's nonsense because there is no least upper bound. There is no way to differentiate between any of these and the rest of the interval. Besides, he couldn't produce even one example of an infinitesimal. All he could do was refer to the Levi-Civita field, which of course is a load of junk too. And the debate really led nowhere because Rubin is a dishonest and vile individual who will not admit to any truth or to the mistakes of mainstream mathematics. At any rate, let's go back to this definition here. In order for this to be the derivative, h must be 0. It can't be infinitesimal, okay? Whatever infinitesimal is, I mean, something terribly small, that would still be untrue. H actually has to be 0. It can't be something just greater than 0 and less than every other real number. There is no such thing. Okay, so infinitesimals are nonsense that don't belong in mathematics, and because academics use the idea of infinitesimals to justify this nonsense, the Cauchy derivative definition, which uses limits and is absolute rubbish, as I've explained in my other applet, Cauchy's Klooch, also on YouTube. But by admitting that this is wrong, they would actually have to throw this away, and they don't want to throw this away simply because they have nothing else. Actually, there is something else now. There is the new calculus. Okay, that's something I've discovered, and the new calculus is the first and only rigorous formulation of calculus in human history. The new calculus does not use limits, infinitesimals, infinity, or any other ill-formed ideas. But, at any rate, using Cauchy's flawed formulation, nothing but h equals 0 will make this definition here work. But ironically, h can never be 0. So, if you take a look at my applet on Cauchy's or Cauchy's Cluj, you'll see that it's just a lot of hand-waving on the part of mainstream academia. Okay, they really don't know what they're talking about. They've been ignorant the past few hundred years. Nobody before me was intelligent enough to realize that the theory is flawed, and they don't want to admit that. They're too arrogant, too dishonest, too vile, too evil to admit that they're wrong. And if you can't see this, well, that's just your loss. The big stupid will do anything they can to shut me down. I can't tell you how many times I've set up a website and it was shut down by academics. You can go to my main calculus site and read about the fracas there, and see how many times they tried to get rid of my work and silence me. But I keep coming back, and I'll keep exposing these myths and this ignorance until my last breath. I feel I owe it to future generations, and it's something that nobody will stop me from doing. I encourage you to study these things in detail, not to accept anything any educator tells you, but to question all knowledge. There is no such thing as an established fact, ever. And that includes the new calculus. If anything ever had to be found which is not true in the new calculus or doesn't make sense, it ought to be revised and made and changed so that it makes sense. Okay, so this presentation here really tells you why mathematicians flatly refuse to acknowledge this is nonsense. Okay, and it's not just about defining this. You can't. Why should you define something which has an ellipsis behind it? Okay, it doesn't mean anything. There is, for example, no such thing as an infinite series, and Newton is to blame for this expression infinite series. The work that Newton did was not with infinite series, it was with partial series. Okay, partial series. Now, partial series, which Newton worked with, have certain properties. They're not infinite. Nothing with an ellipsis following it is infinite. And so one of the goals that I've had along my life's journey is to expose wrong ideas and wrong terminology. And so this is one of the things that really needs to go from mathematics. There is no such thing as infinite. I have always stated that in order to claim that any term or expression is well formed, one should be able to reify it. And I don't mean physically. It could be physically or intangibly, but it must be a perfect concept. And so that's all I wanted to discuss in this particular YouTube video. I'm a little out of breath now, so I think I'm going to stop. Hope you've enjoyed this video. This is a new calculus channel. I'm John Gabriel. Till next time.